You are listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Well, happy Thursday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Intrepid radio program. This is Scotty Roberts, your host, and you can find the show in audio form over on the network station at odyssey1.com, ODYSY1.com. And you can come on over to the YouTube channel to see the simulcast of this broadcast in video, along with our live chat room and all the Intrepheads that join us every day to talk about the show, the contents of the show, and a million other things in the chat room as well. So come on over, and that's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And I'm going to tell you all right up front, this is a pre-recorded show, and mostly because right now going on live, which started about an hour ago at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Rocky Stucci, the Situation Room, me, and Jeffrey Dougherty of the Christian Whistleblower have gathered for a live remote broadcast from the Depot Bar and Grill in Hastings, Minnesota. And we're going to be doing some ghost stories there, as well as very possibly doing a little ghost hunting tonight. And so this program that you're listening to right now is going on while that live broadcast is happening. And so you can go look that up at Rocky Stucci Media and over on YouTube. And I believe we are also doing some live streams over on Facebook through Rocky Stucci Media. So go check it out. You can listen to this show anytime on the archive over on my YouTube channel. Or if you don't want to join the live broadcast, just listen away to this program, and hopefully it will be efficacious for you this evening. Now, I have to be very honest and tell you, I came on this morning and wanted to figure out what to talk about tonight. I didn't have... I've got some plans for some other mini-series within this program, and I just have not nailed it down as to when I wanted to start those. I did not want to start it on a night when we were doing another live broadcast somewhere else that competes with this broadcast. So tonight, I'm just kind of freewheeling it here. I am speaking from the seat of my pants, as they might say. So I've got a few things in mind. I thought I would kind of stick to some paranormal topics, since that's what we're doing elsewhere tonight, and talk about some of the stories that I have and some of the methods that we've used to do things. And hopefully you'll enjoy this and forgive the fact that I might be a little disjointed today. And so there, I've taken up enough time talking about what I'm not talking about and how I don't have anything to talk about. And, you know, for me, I will say, for me to announce that I have nothing to talk about is kind of silly, because I've always got something to talk about. You want to sit and engage me in any kind of conversation, political, paranormal, theological, I'm generally up for that game. So tonight, let's talk a little bit about I want to share with you, maybe you can call it some ghost stories, if you will. These are things that have happened to me, things that I've experienced along the way, and why I that's the wrong language to use, why I believe that there is a paranormal element out there. And let's maybe address the topic of what it is we're talking about when we're talking about paranormal. I have seen a lot of people out there that think the paranormal is all about ghosts, which sometimes it is. It's about spirits. It's about the possibility of there being interdimensional beings of some kind that communicate with us out there. Some have identified these interdimensional beings as extraterrestrial, And now get out of your mind the picture of the movies and extraterrestrial and aliens and all of that, and get into your mind extraterrestrial means simply terrestrial is earthbound, part of this planet. Extra means outside of that or away from that. And so an extraterrestrial could be, in essence, you could say something like God or an angel or a demon or a devil could be extraterrestrial. They're celestial beings. There are things that are not of this world. And so when a ghost or a spirit, when we look at that and we say a ghost or a spirit could be an extraterrestrial being, could that be the ghost of someone who had once had a carnate life in the flesh, who had once lived on this planet? And that's the state they're in now, outside of life on the physical flesh and blood life. And so it's the ghost of a person who once lived. Could it be the spirit of a person? And by the way, when we talk about ghosts and spirits, I am what you might call a trichotomist. We used to have the question, are you a dichotomist or a trichotomist when it came to theological things? Dichotomist was a body and a soul. Trichotomist is a body, soul, and spirit, and that those are different things. That the body is one thing, the soul is the elemental. I stated that wrong. The core elements of who the person is. I, Scotty Roberts, am. This is my soul. This is who I am. Perhaps in reincarnation, if that exists, that soul has been carried on, and I'm not just Scotty Roberts, but the essence behind Scotty Roberts, and take your own name and fill in the blank. All the personages that have made up who you are, in physical form, are all really comprised of the basis of who you are, that soul. And then there's the spirit, that thing that goes on forever. And there seems to be a fine line between those two, that soul and spirit issue. The soul is who you are. The spirit is everything about you. It's the energy. It's everything else. So there's a body, soul, and a spirit. So which of those are we seeing in ghostly encounters, as they might be labeled, in paranormal investigation work? And by the way, there's a huge difference between paranormal investigation and ghost hunting. Those are two very different things. Ghost hunting, you're looking for activity. You're looking for ghosts. You may be conjuring up ghosts, asking for ghosts to appear, and so on. I think in investigation work, that's maybe taking it a step deeper. You're not just looking for the ghost, you're looking for the reasons why. You're looking for what you're really contacting. Is that thing a ghost? Is it a spirit? Is it an elemental? Is it an extraterrestrial of some form? And so that's kind of where we get when we start doing our investigation work. Sometimes I've got stories, plenty of stories, where I've had something come in contact with me that has either given me the name of somebody I knew in actual life, in physical life, that has passed on, but not always able to give me all the details, not able to answer questions for clarity. Although it will answer some questions. I had, here, I'll get to an example in a second. So perhaps you're encountering something that is not the spirit or the soul of that person who once lived, but something imitating it, or something taking on its characteristics. In theological and church work, of course, we condemned all of this as stuff of Satan and the devil, that it's the devil using spirits to mimic or to, what's the other word, take on the role of someone who had once been alive in order to deceive, in order to draw attention away. And you would ask, draw attention away from what? Deceive about what? Well, in theology, if there is a theological message of salvation and so on, what can you do with that? If a point of theology says, let's say in Christianity, there is verses in the New Testament which say, absence from the body is presence with the Lord. Or it talks about once you die, you go here or here. If that could be countered by saying there's a ghost of somebody who was once alive that says, no, I'm in a very different place. It's not what I was taught when I was alive. You, of course, are getting what some people within theological circles might say was a distractionary tactic of the evil side of the universe, of those trying to distract people's attention away from God. Now, once again, if you remember our shows where we were talking about the historical Jesus, and we mentioned this diabolical mimicry that goes on, it fits into that same category. And that, to me, seems to indicate that God is powerless to fight against that, or powerless to make his message more clearer than those who are evil that would want to undermine his message, or deceive people, or distract people from his message, which would then say to me, is evil, it makes me ask the question, is the evil element just as powerful as God, if God has no power at all to counter them, or to make a better argument? So I tend to throw out that whole notion of diabolical mimicry. But at the same time, I would say that there may be spirits out there, and we've encountered some, that imitate things in order to draw attention to itself, to get people to pay attention to it. They either crave that attention for what reason we don't know. Is it because they're lonely on that side? Is it because there are other judgments that haven't happened on that other side, theologically or spiritually speaking, and they crave that attention? I don't know exactly. Rocky and I last night on the Situation Room mused about why would a ghost want to hang around at a graveyard? Or why is there certain ghostly elements and personalities that are repeatedly encountered in places like cold, dark, dank, old coal cellars of buildings? Why would a ghost hang out there? Do they have someplace they go when there's not a paranormal investigator there, and they go, oh, I got to set down my book or my paper or my whatever I'm doing up here, frolicking in the golden light and through the fields of Valhalla or wherever they might be, and I got to go back down to that dank coal cellar to make my presence known? Don't know. There's no way to get beyond certain points. There are certain veils we cannot cross. But all we are finding, as techniques refine, as equipment refines, we're finding that there are ways to detect some things, and that there's definitely things out there. This all isn't just gymnastics of the imagination going on when you encounter things. And so, as we investigate, we have to try to draw some conclusions, or such conclusions as we can come to. Now, I will be very honest and say there is a lot of criticism, and has been for years out there, of paranormal groups that will want to try to conjure up spirits as fun time, like a Victorian parlor trick. Look, I've called up a ghost. Isn't that cool? And so the thrill-seeking factor is there. And I will admit that even if you are doing serious investigations, there are times where the thrill factor is definitely intact. You're reaching something, you're talking to something, and it is something that's giving you that excitement factor. And you want to know more. You want to be drawn in more. I get that. I understand that. I've experienced that. And sometimes the more you get, the more you are drawn into. Even take even a lone singular setting where you've made contact with something, and you keep getting that contact, and you keep getting drawn in and drawn in and drawn in. Now, there's something, I don't see a long-term problem with that. I don't see that lasting beyond the point where you say, okay, thanks for the contact, I gotta go now. And you go back with your recordings or with any evidence that you've picked up, and you're satisfied with what you found. You might be drawn back to that location to try it again. You might plan to do that, but I don't see something as being drawn into a conversation. You're giving your attention to whatever is asking you for that attention. Is there necessarily an innate evil in that, an innate wrong that's being done? No, I don't think so. If we weren't supposed to communicate with them, we would not have the ability to make contact with them. So that ability is there, and it's been there over the centuries, the thousands of years. Even, if I were to say even theologically, you go back to biblical times, the New Testament is filled, and the Old Testament, filled with ghostly sightings and ghostly encounters. And you just got to look for them and find them. We put them in that spiritual category. And we say, wow, that's, we don't think about it being ghostly. You think of, we made mention of this in our talking about Gnosticism and the historical Jesus, was that Jesus himself appeared on the Mount, which been called, the incident's called the Mount of Transfiguration, where he had Peter and James and Peter, James, and John, I think it was, and took them up to the mountain, and there Moses and Elijah appeared with Jesus and talked with him. Now, we put those in these spiritual categories when looking at the story, and because they were huge biblical patriarchs of the Old Testament, we forget that they are also appearing in spirit. And so there is something about that encounter that would have been a ghostly encounter, if it happened at all. And it was, as we mentioned, even in the Gnosticism episodes I was doing, that was a common occurrence amongst some of the other God-men throughout history. So all of these experiences, when you look at them, you're encountering something, but you don't always know what you're encountering. How many of you out there have not had any encounters of this kind at all? Nothing. Not even wondering what that sound is in the night, or something that you hear, or something that happens. You have no idea what that is, and it might cross your mind, maybe that's what they call these ghostly encounters. What's making that noise? What's done that? But we've got a fight or flight element of our psyche, that we hear something and it might startle us and we wonder what that is, but we immediately go to the fight or flight. You go seek it out, or you find a reason to cover it up in your mind. Oh, well, it's an old house. It settles, it creaks, it pops, or the weather's changing, and so that happens with my own bones and joints. Why wouldn't it happen to a house? And so we have ways of looking at these things and finding sometimes just natural explanations for things. But natural explanation can sometimes be mired a bit when the natural explanation looks and sounds like the same thing as a real encounter. So you can have that approach to things. It's all natural things. It's all stuff that just happens, and there is no spiritual element to it at all. Or you might have these minor experiences where you say, I think I heard a voice. I think I saw something move. I think, this, that, or the other thing. And then you have the full-blown experiences where I've either seen an apparition, or I've communicated with something, or something has talked to me, something has touched me, pushed me, shoved me, run its fingers through my hair at night, things like that. And these are all things that have happened to me. I remember an incident where, this is very early on with my wife Rainey, prior to our being married, which, by the way, I just want to tell you, is just a few days away. It's the 24th today of October. On the 27th is our 12th wedding anniversary. And so that's coming up. So, but there was one night, and this was back in 2005. I want to say it was late 2005. And we're asleep in bed, and it's the middle of the night to us. And all of a sudden, this big, and I may have mentioned this once before because I have recollection of talking about it, our big comforter was yanked off the bed. And I remember sitting up, it woke me up, And I sat up and I reached down and I grabbed it and I pulled it back up because it was being pulled off of us. And I thought, wow, what caused that? And I remember looking upside down at the clock and it was 4:44 a.m. And I thought, what's the significance of the 444? And then I went back to sleep. And then the next morning, in trying to decipher this little incident, I had this big, heavy, not a quilt, it was a comforter on my bed. And if you're familiar with the brand, the Woolrich brand, it was, this is back in the mid-2000s, that these were very popular. And it was a brown kind of kit glove feeling suede is what it was. And I think it was probably a faux suede. It was a fabric. And on the underside was the faux sheepskin, the pile lining on the inside. And this thing was very heavy. And it was on a California king-sized bed. And for that thing to have just slid off of us in the middle of the night would have been quite a feat. And so I sat the next morning and tried to figure out how much of that heavy comforter would have to be hanging off of us and off of the bed before the weight of it pulled the rest of it off the bed. And I got it worked down to a corner of about 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet of the bed, and the comforter hanging off that corner before the weight of the rest of it just finally slowly dragged that off the bed. So it would have had to have been quite a slow process. What happened to us in the middle of the night that woke us up, it was almost as if somebody was grabbing the ends of that comforter and saying, okay, watch my next trick, whoosh, and just yanked that thing off because it went flying off of us, and I sat up and grabbed it and yanked it back over us. So then the 444 came in. 4, I found out much later, was the number of angels, as numerology puts it. And now I don't know the significance of the 444. 4 plus 4 plus 4 equals 12, and 1 plus 2 or 1 minus 2. I don't know any of that. I don't know how to figure any of that out. If any of you knows that out there in the chat room, you want to leave it in the chat room, that'd be very cool. Numerology I don't do, and I don't know much about it. But that's what happened to us that night. So that was one of those ghostly experiences that was of that second kind. You're not just hearing it or experiencing it externally, it's happening to you. Now, my wife's brother had passed away somewhere along that time period of wounds sustained in Iraq. He was in the army and he was combat. And she wondered if that might have been him. So wondering about those things does not make it those things, but that's some of the wonder that came up, that this would have been around the same time that happened. And so sometimes you experience things on that level. Then sometimes you get one step closer and you converse with things. You not only see them and physically experience them, you interact with them. And I've had plenty of those situations where there is interaction. And we get a lot of that through like devices like these, where this is a spirit box, where you can set it up and pick up sounds like live EVPs, and things will communicate with you. And Rocky and I, by the way, this weekend will be out at the Minnesota Renaissance Festival grounds for the Phantom's Feast for Halloween, and taking people on a ghost hunt of the grounds and some of the old stages out there. And it's beautiful. You've just got to get the picture in your mind. This is a beautiful old site that looks like an extended movie set, or as if you have walked into the past and taken snapshots of what villages looked like 500 years ago, 600 years ago. And so a lot of the Tudor-style buildings out there and everything. And so we're going to be doing that this weekend and doing more with that, so watch for the live broadcasts of that. And right now I've come up to the end of the first segment, so sit tight for 2 minutes. We'll be right back. All right, folks, welcome back. Thanks for sitting through the break. And this is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. And you can join the live stream over at the video version of this, the simulcast, on my YouTube channel at Mr. Scotty Roberts. And tonight's broadcast is a pre-record from earlier this morning that I made. And because tonight we are going to be live, and we're live right now, we started at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Rocky Stucci and me and our guest Jeff Dougherty over at the Depot Bar and Grill in Hastings, Minnesota, where we're doing a live broadcast from there right now that's actually kind of in conflict with this one. But hopefully not competing for your time, because you can always go back and listen to the archive of this show either at odyssey1.com, that's ODYSY1.com, or over on iTunes, over on iHeartRadio, over on Spreaker, all of those places where you can find the rebroadcast of this through the Odyssey Radio Network, or come on over to my YouTube stream and you can find the simulcast there. And it's always archived after the show, so you can scroll back through all my shows from the moment I started over at Odyssey Radio Network. All those are right here on this channel in my YouTube, and beyond that, going back a year of my broadcast. So they're all right here on the YouTube channel. So that's where we are right now live. Some of you may be tuned in over there and have caught this much later, and you're viewing this much later than the date where it went up. Some of you might be just listening live right now on the radio tonight, Thursday night. And it's 9:30 Central Standard Time and 10:30 Eastern Time on Thursday night, the 24th of October, 2019. So there you go. There's the particulars of where we are and when we are. You're listening either live now or time capsuled for a later date. And you may be joining us live, and that might be where you are right now too. So I want to thank you either way. Now, we were talking about paranormal stuff, talking about some of the stories, some of the encounters I've had, how they differentiate from others. We are doing that right now live over with the live broadcast and some of the live streams we're doing at the Depot Bar and Grill. And so I thought it'd be good in this program tonight to talk about some of those things for those of you who aren't joining us on the live stream. And I kind of left off talking about some of the things that I've encountered, the different experiences that you can have. You might be skeptical of all of this kind of thing, skeptical of ghostly encounters, skeptical of spirit encounters, skeptical of anything that happens of this nature. I have friends that are so skeptical they can't even accept the fact that something like this might actually happen without there being some natural explanation for it. I had a friend of mine who, and I may have mentioned this, and it might have been on Rocky's show, on the Situation Room that I mentioned this just yesterday, I think, where I had a friend of mine who was skeptical of something that we caught on tape. And he heard that on the tape, and he said, I think you just saw what you needed to see. It was the face that I saw, and the FUs on the EVPs that we got. And I had a piece of cat in my mouth. Cat hair or something. Pardon me, folks, for the that little bit of nastiness there. I had a piece of hair in my mouth. I think it can only be the cat. It floats around the air. I hate that about animals in the house. Their hair floats around, their dander floats around, they spit up hairballs and all kinds of things like that. So pardon that little intrusion into civility here. So all of these things happen around us, and the skeptics, I had a skeptical friend, a friend of mine for 20 years, good friend, said, well, you only saw what you saw because you were tired. It was late at night. You needed to see a ghost. And so you saw one. And I said, now, wait a minute, Jim. I said to my buddy, I said, you know me well enough. have I ever been a person that comes across to you as somebody who needs to see a ghost so bad that I'll manufacture that shit? And out of either my imagination or my tiredness or whatever it might be. Now, if I was tired, I might maybe think I see something out of the corner of my eye and go, you know what, I'm really tired. But when I see something full on and I communicate with it, that's not manufactured. That's not certainly not manufactured out of being too tired. It's the thing that actually kind of wakes you up when it happens. And I'm not talking about a glimpse of something and it passes and it's gone, you don't see it again. Maybe that could happen if you're overly tired. But I've never had the need to see a ghost or a spirit or something paranormal so badly that my mind manufactures it. I don't think that way. And he had to admit, yeah, what I know about you, I guess you're not that kind of person. And that's not what I do. If I experience something, I experience something. If I have my doubts about something I've experienced, I express those doubts. If I see a face and it's there and it's an apparition, I know whether or not I've seen it or whether or not I'm dreaming it. There's no doubt about that. And so in my experiences, I've seen things, and I only talk about the things I've seen. Can I explain all of them? No, I can't. I don't know the answers to everything that we encounter, but I know we encounter a lot of weird shit out there, and we've seen things. Now, people in that realm of what I mentioned last segment that are in that spiritual, I don't even want to call it spiritual because I think it's a dogmatic theological realm that will say, oh, that's all satanic, it's all evil, it's all distractions from God, and so on. Those are people who will take everything that happens in any experience you have and write it off as being something of the devil. Now, are they denying that those things happen? No. What they're doing, though, is trying to put on an explanation from that fight or flight capacity of the human psyche that says, I've got to explain that as something very different so I can cope with that. If it goes against my theological dogmas, I've got to find a way to explain that. And perhaps the best way to explain that is to say it's something of the devil, because that fits within the framework of what I choose to believe. Pardon me. And so I encounter a lot of that with people when I talk about these things. Oh, boy, you're just lost. You got the devil. He's got you right where he wants you, is the kind of response I get from people. And yet I don't think that's what that is. I think there are too many things that happen in these experiences that prove it's not. I have mentioned many times there are incidences where I have encountered beings that will talk to me, that will give me their name, that will, and this is via EVP or Spirit Box, and sometimes you don't get all the information, so you don't know if you're getting a counterfeit, if you're getting somebody that's trying to draw your attention, or, as I've heard it explained, spirits that don't always remember everything from this realm, the physical realm, because they've gone on to something where they've been before and now they're back there and they will continue on. I don't know the mechanics of how all of that works. You could get a Buddhist or somebody who believes in reincarnation that could explain to you how the reincarnation process and how the soul or the spirit goes through all these different incarnations along the way. I cannot explain that for you. Reincarnation? Jury is still out for me, mostly because I don't understand it. I don't know how to qualify it, quantify it, understand it, believe it, that it is so. I sometimes talk as if I do, but I default to that sometimes rather than say, I've got it all figured out and I could explain it back to you. I've been told I've had, I don't know how many it was, 39 or 139, something like that, past lives. Well, and by a couple of different sources, independent sources. So I don't know what to believe about that. What is that? Again, is that an actual thing, or is that a deceit of the devil? as we would say in our old theological circles I was involved with. So is it all a distraction from God? Is it all a distraction of one kind or another? Or is our understanding very different of theological things? Our dogmas sway over us and guide us in a certain direction to believe one thing or another about these kinds of spiritual encounters or ghostly encounters. And so I have to take them all at face value when I encounter them. And like I say, I've got stories, I've got an arm's length of stories that go out to there, and I could go on for days and days and days telling you of everything in my ghostly encounters, from just the little tick in the night, or the sound, or the voice, or the this, or the that, or the spiritual experience, all the way up to the profound, the apparition, the something talking with me from the other side. And so something interacting with me. For instance, I was out at the Renaissance Festival grounds this last Sunday night for the Phantom's Feast. We weren't supposed to be out there, and so Rocky and I couldn't both make it, but we were asked at the last minute if we could fill in for somebody who couldn't make it, different group that he had out there, and I was able to go out and fill in. And so I went out with just a spirit box, which I couldn't get to work properly. And we were at one of the stages out there at the festival, one of the theatrical stages. And we heard, when I asked for a certain entity that was supposed to be there, that had been trapped there by some pagan priests or priestesses, people who practice in that. Some foolish kids had called something up, couldn't shut it down, and these people who knew what they were doing came in and locked it down. And it was supposed to be trapped on the upper floor of this pavilion stage. And so I asked if it could speak to me through this particular box, this one that I have sitting right here. And I didn't have the right settings on it. This is Rocky's spirit box, and so I didn't have all the right settings. I didn't know exactly how he makes it work the right way. And I wasn't picking up anything on this, but as we were talking about the entity up there to the audience and trying to ask for response, we got a big bang, clunk, clunk up on the upper floor. Now, this is all open air. As a matter of fact, you know what I can do? While we are talking about this, I'm going to show you a picture of the pavilion stage at the Minnesota Renaissance Festival. I'm going to show you what this stage looks like and where I was. Let's see. The pavilion, I'm looking for a picture right now that I can share with you. And I put that in, of course, as a direct search criteria, the pavilion stage. But is it coming up? No. Every other picture from the Minnesota Renaissance Festival is coming up, except that picture of that particular stage. Now, I had some of the memories on my Facebook come up over the last few days because Rocky and I had done the show for so many years. I've got one here. I think this is the old bakery stage where we go and we get a lot of spiritual activity there. Let's see. All right, Minnesota Renaissance Festival. I know this is lots of amazing live scintillating radio here, but let me see if I can just find one for you. And if I can't, I'll give up on this. But the pavilion stage is a place where it's all open air, and it's got big, not pillars, posts that are built in the structure. And so it's open air on the ground level and seating in a small stage on the inside. And then the upper floor is also all open air. And you can access it through, at the far end of this building, you can access the upstairs by a kind of a ladder staircase that goes up. And that was locked off, and we couldn't get into it the other night. Otherwise, we'd have gone up there to see if we could find out what was making the noise. The interesting thing about it, and this is where I say when you have experiences like this, you can sometimes go through the process of trying to debunk them right away. And by debunking, meaning find out, is there anything else that could have caused this situation to happen? Here, I found a picture here. I'm going to try this. I'm going to see if I can save this. And let's see. I'm going to save this image. And let's see if we can call this up. And it doesn't show the full stage here, but it does show it up close a little bit, and you can get an idea of where we were when this happened. I'm going to put this in here, and I'm going to go back over to my program here, and I'm going to see if I can add an image for you. And you can see what this stage looks like. And this also gives you an idea of what the whole festival grounds look like. Let me find it here. I put it in here. And let's find it here. And right there. Okay. Now, here it is. Let me blow this up for you. This is the pavilion stage. Now, it's not the full picture of it, so you can't see it. But this is the downstairs on the bottom there. That's where everybody sits. It's all open air, as you can see. Then the upstairs is all open air. It's got the railings that go around, and that's it. And the steeple up in the front. And the stairway is to the right, to the back. And these are just, you can see there are banners that are hung up for color during the festival itself. So this is the pavilion stage. This is where this took place. And Rocky and I are going to be back there on tomorrow night and Saturday night and see if we can't do some more investigating there. And I'm looking to see if there are any other good pictures of the pavilion stage. And I'm not seeing a whole lot here. And by the way, I did the Minnesota Renaissance Festival in entertainment for years. I was out there since as early as the early 1980s, but was not an official entertainer out there till much later. But that stage has never, as long as I've been out there, as long as I had been out there, had never been something that was open to the public or even open to entertainers to be able to go up there and check it out. It's always been kind of an off-limits place. And part of that was because of the spiritual element that was there. That element that closed off that upstairs, that locked some entity up there. And it became an unofficial official rule that you could not go up there because of this. And so, it's sometimes something that comes up as I'm seeing some of these pictures that are going by my face of the Renaissance Festival as well, is that places can be constructed that aren't really old places, but they can attract the spirits or the ghosts of those who have been there in an instant, in a heartbeat. It could be something overseas, could be moved immediately because they're not on the same plane anymore. And that's what has been found, that sometimes places like this attract ghosts and spirits. Sometimes they're called up. Now, if you keep in mind the Minnesota Renaissance Festival being, it's in the midst of, as I've mentioned, an old oak grove. The whole site is filled with oak trees and this huge canopy of oak trees. And there's all these winding roads that go through this place where these buildings have all been erected over the years to look like an old Renaissance-era village. Medieval in some points. And so underneath all of that, the site itself sits on a quarry. And I believe it's a limestone quarry beneath that. And the quarry is all around this site for acres and acres and acres. And the festival exists on the quarry. So beneath all of this is a limestone quarry. And there's one of these ideas that spirit activity is retained within limestone. It is a great place for this stuff to be retained. And so you've got all this activity over these years. The Minnesota Renaissance Festival, I believe, began in 1972 as a little tented festival out on an open green somewhere. And a bunch of hippies, if you can imagine, the early 70s, throwing on an art festival like this. And it grew into what it is now. And a few years later, they acquired this site by lease, which they're still leasing this site 40 years later, and built this village. And some of these buildings they're not old. They're not 200 years old, 500 years old. They were built to look that age, but at the same time, they are old buildings in their own right in an oak grove on a limestone quarry site. So it makes it a very interesting place for the retention of energy. And so out there on that site, I've had a few spiritual experiences out there. I remember when I acted out there and worked out there, I didn't have so much time to go exploring those things, and it's mostly been after the fact, what Rocky and I do now when we go out there. And we have had encounters out there that are very interesting on the voice box or the spirit box. I am going to go in while we're talking, and since this is kind of a show that's going on while we've got a live broadcast going on, I'm being a little free here with my time and the way I'm broadcasting tonight. And those of you, by the way, who are listening audibly, I do have to apologize that you cannot see some of these images I'm throwing up. So I try to describe them a little bit for you. But you can come over to the YouTube channel either right now or any time in the future, and you can look up this particular a show, and you can see some of these photos that I'm throwing up here. I am, while we're talking, I am still scrolling through some of my own photos of the festival, and I'm going to see if I can put up a couple of more images to give you an idea of where some of this stuff took place. This pavilion stage, I know I've got a better photo of that, so I'm going to look for that, and I'm going to look for photos of other places. But most of my spiritual experiences, my encounters with the, if you will, celestial beings, ghosts, spirits, have actually been in my own home. Over the years, accumulated activity, accumulated experiences. And it used to be that our home always had something going on in it. And that's where we found most of the things that we've run into. If I get a voice that's coming across, or my old long-dead aunt speaks to me through a device, it was sometimes in my own home. There were things that happened in my own home that we wanted to make sure we knew what we were dealing with. And we would go looking for that. And because I didn't prep this ahead of time, I'm not finding the pictures, of course, that I see every day are not just popping up for me so I can show you what things look like. So we'll skip that for now. And but some of the experiences in my own home have gone from, having the blankets yanked off of us at one point, to my daughters encountering things in the house, to me encountering things in the house. And I've told you some of the little stories along the way that have gone on while living in different places. I think I may have mentioned this one, I'm not sure. And this is one of those things that you chalk up to maybe being a bit subjective. You've got to ask yourself, did this really happen this way? Is it really a ghost? Is it really a spiritual encounter or something like that? But I do recall having little devices go off. I had the little Lost in Space robot from the 60s series that had a voice-activated sensor in it. Danger, Will Robinson, it would say, or my sensors indicate an intruder is present. And I'd be sitting in my house, and that would just start going off in the hallway. And I'd walk out, and then the little ball that the rat would walk around, and my kids had a pet rat. It would just come rolling into my room in the middle of the night with no animal in it, and things like that. So little experiences like that happened to me all the time in our house. And voices, things waking you up, seeing things, having things touch you, picking up things on recorders and devices. Have any of you had those kinds of experiences where you know what I'm talking about? This has happened to you. It's happened to me. And it's constant. It's everywhere I go. Even this house where we are right now. I turned on this little spirit box the other day just to test it. And it came across when my son was standing here, my 10-year-old, and it said, hello, right out of the box. And so my son wondered, is that a ghost, Dad? I said, well, I don't know. Maybe it was just the radio. But folks, that's all I've got for tonight. We didn't get very deep, get very far. I hope some of this talk of this stuff was interesting for you. Go catch us live, the tail end of our live broadcast. Or you can catch us this weekend as we're doing live streams from the Renaissance Festival site, Rocky and me. And so I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. Thanks for letting me blether for an hour. And we'll see you next time. I appreciate you being here.